Hello, John O'Keefe. It's been a busy day. I'm here, I'm present, I'm accounted for, and I get to use my sweetheart's computer, which means I get the opportunity to travel, which means I can go to the back room, which is great. Hello, it has been a very long time since I've had the pleasure of being here with you. I'm trying to get that light looking pretty good, and I'm hoping that today will be an all right presentation. How are you? I am at this point in my backyard. I apologize for being late. Reasoning, because I had to work, and although I love to think that this could at some day pay the bills, it doesn't. So I'm here now. John O'Keefe, Mr. O, welcome. I am ecstatic and could not miss another opportunity to be reading with my team today. And so today, as we venture in, let's start talking a little bit briefly about what just occurred. So realize the spinners aren't ready to play. Realize that Luxa still has the excellent strategies of being able to fly super well and be able to rocket the house a whole bunch. I'm feeling like I'm going to switch around because it goes light and then dark and then light and then dark, and I can't stand that. So watch this. Boom. I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to go over here. Better, a little bit more consistent, at least I hope so. So you know how much I like to read outside anyway. Springtime has arrived here in Georgia. And with the exception of the pollen, it's absolutely exquisite to be here. So let's get back to that. Luxa is an exquisite flyer. Vicus and Solivet are headed out. They are no longer going to be a part of the party. And all of a sudden they show up with this Ripred guy, an amazing rat. The enemy, and one we have already met, a slash across the face. And obviously there are relations between Solivet Vicus and Ripred. I'm believing that you're going to assume that he at one point had the army of rats behind him. Something obviously happened. He lost faith with them, or at least I'm going to infer that. And I'm sure we're going to learn more as we go on. Of course, Gregor, of course they are having a very difficult time trusting the fact that there is a rat involved. And so, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let's rock this. We are halfway through chapter 19. Our goal is to get to the end of chapter 20, which means that we will have read 1.5 chapters. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, that's about 20 pages. And right now it's 3 minutes into our discussion. So let's see how fast and wonderful and glorious we can get this going. Bring it on. As if following his thoughts, Vicus spoke up. You need Ripred to guide you to your father. These tunnels are unmapped by humans. You would never find your way without him. Still, he was a rat. This is where we left yesterday. Gregor had only been in the Underland a few days, and he already despised rats. They had killed Luxa's and Henry's parents, imprisoned his father, and almost eaten him and Boots. He felt a kind of power surging through him when he thought of how much he hated them. Just 3 days. Already hatred. But if all the rats were bad, who was this strange creature staring at him from across the fire, offering to be their guide? So what's in this for you? Said Gregor to Ripred. A fair question, said Ripred. Well, warrior, I am planning to overthrow King Gorger, and I need you to help me. By doing what? Said Gregor. I don't know, admitted Ripred. None of us does. Gregor rose and caught Vicus by the arm. I have to talk to you alone, he said. The anger in his voice surprised even himself. Well, he was angry. The rat was not part of what he'd agreed to. This was not what he'd signed on for. Vicus took Gregor's mood in stride. Maybe he had expected it. They walked about 20 yards away from the group. So how long have you had this plan with the rat? Asked Gregor. Vicus thought for a moment. Not sure exactly. Perhaps 2 or so years. Of course, it all depends upon your arrival. How come you didn't tell me about it before? Demanded Gregor. I do not believe in giving people more information than they can handle, said Vicus. Who says I can't handle it? I can handle it, said Gregor. obviously not handling it. Perhaps you can, at least more easily than Luxa and Henry. I may well have told you if we had ever finished our discussion of the prophecy of Gray, said Vicus. No doubt you would have asked, and yes, I may well have told you. Gregor pulled the prophecy from his pocket and said, let's finish it right now. He searched out the part of the prophecy where they had left off. One gnar beside and one lost up ahead. So Ripred is the gnar, and my dad is the one lost up ahead, said Gregor. He read on. Makes sense now. And 8 will be left when we count up the dead. What does that mean? Asked Gregor, pointing to the line. If you add up all the players in the prophecy, 2 over, 2 under, 2 flyers, 2 crawlers, 2 spinners, 1 gnar, and 1 lost, you have a total of 12, said Vicus gravely. By the end of the quest, only 8 will remain alive. 4 will be dead, but no one knows what for. Oh, said Gregor, stunned. He'd heard the words before, but they'd only registered right now. 4 of us dead? But 8 alive, Gregor, said Vicus gently, and perhaps a world saved. Gregor couldn't deal with that part now, wondering who would be left standing at the end of the day. He pushed on to the final stanza of the prophecy. The last who will die must decide where he stands. The fate of the 8 is contained in his hands. So bid him take care. Bid him look where he leaps, as life may be death, and death life again reaps. Wow, I'm already starting to think. Are you starting to think? I'm starting to think. I don't get this last part, said Gregor. Nor do I, nor does anyone. It is very cryptic. I believe no one will fully understand it until the final moment has arrived, said Vicus. Gregor, it is not pleasant, it is not easy, but it is essential what I ask you to do. Essential to you, if you wish to find your father, essential for my people, if they are to survive underneath. Gregor felt his anger ebbing and fear filling the empty spaces it left. He took another tack. I don't want to go with that rat, said Gregor, almost pleading. He'll kill us. No, you cannot judge Ripred by what you know of other rats. He has wisdom unique in any creature. Things were not always so bad between humans and rats. When Solibit and Ripred and I were younger, we lived in relative peace. Ripred would see that restored, but King Gorger wishes all humans dead, said Vicus. So you're saying Ripred's a good rat, said Gregor, choking on the words. If he were not, would I trust my granddaughter to his care? Asked Vicus. Your granddaughter? Said Gregor blankly. Luxa's mother was my daughter, Judith, said Vicus. You're her grandpa? Why does she call you Vicus? Asked Gregor. These people were so weird and formal. How could he not have known that? It is our way, said Vicus. Look after her. If this is hard for you, know it is torture for Luxa. I haven't said I'm going yet, said Gregor. He looked into the old man's eyes. All right, I'm going. Is there anything else I need to know that you haven't told me? Only this. Despite what I said, I knew you were the warrior from the first moment I spied you, said Vicus. Thanks. Great. That's very helpful, said Gregor. And they returned to the group. All right, Boots. Boots and I, we're going with the rat. Who else is in? There was a pause. Where goes the princess, go we, said Temp. Oh, where goes the princess, go we, said Temp. What say you, Luxa? Said Vicus. What can I say, Vicus? Can I return to our people and tell them I withdrew from the quest when our survival hangs in the balance? Said Luxa bitterly. Of course you cannot, Luxa. This is why he times it so, said Henry. You could choose to, started Vicus. I could choose? I could choose? Retorted Luxa. Do not offer me a choice when you know none exists. She and Henry turned their backs on Vicus. Flyers? Said Solibit. As Vicus seemed to have lost the ability to talk. Aurora and I go with our bonds, muttered Ares. Aurora and I go with our bonds, muttered Ares. Then it is settled. Come, Marith. We are needed at home, said Solibit. A distraught Marith quickly made up packs of food for the members of the quest. "Fly you high, all of you," he said in a strained voice, and climbed on his bat. Solivit mounted her bat and unrolled her map, while Ripred helped her work out the safest route back to Regalia. Vicus moved to Henry and Luxa. Neither of them would turn to look at him. "I would not part this way, but I understand your anger, your hearts. Perhaps one day you will be able to forgive me this moment. Fly you high, Henry. Fly you high, Luxa," said Vicus. He waited for a response, but none came. He turned and climbed heavily onto his bat. As miserable as Gregor felt about being dumped with a rat, his heart ached for Vicus. He wanted to scream at Luxa, "Say something! Don't let your grandpa fly off like this. 4 of us aren't coming back." But the words caught in his throat. Part of him wasn't ready to forgive Vicus for abandoning them either. "Fly you high, Gregor the Overlander," said Vicus. Gregor struggled with how to respond. Should he ignore Vicus? Let him know that none of them, not even an Overlander, could forgive him. Just as he had steeled himself against replying, Gregor thought of the last 2 years, 7 months, and was it 15 days now? There were so many things he'd wished he would have said to his dad when he had a chance. Things like how special it was when they went on the roof at night and tried to find stars, or how much he loved it when they took the subway out to the stadium to watch a baseball game, or just that he felt lucky that out of all the people in the world, his dad was his dad. Connection. Call my father, make sure he knows. He didn't have room inside him for any more unspoken words. The bats were rising into the air. He only had a second. "Fly you high, Vicus," he yelled. "Fly you high!" Vicus turned back, and Gregor could see tears shining on his cheeks. He lifted up a hand to Gregor in thanks, and then they were gone. How does one feel when one doesn't believe that they have what it's going to take to be the person that they need to be? And those people who you leaned on for so long, who were the people who you believed had all the answers, just turned the corner and said goodbye. When have you experienced that? I'll bet you $1 million you probably experienced it your first day of school. I'll bet $1 million you felt it the first day that you went to middle school. I'll bet you $1 million if you've ever had the chance to be left by your parents with either a family friend or an older grandparent or relative who you don't know really well, and you haven't had that experience very much. Maybe when you slept over at a friend's house, right? See what I'm saying? Like, all these things are moments where you don't know if you're going to be able to do what it's going to take. Maybe your first audition, maybe your tryout of a sport. Those are the kinds of things we're talking about here. You know what I mean? I don't know if I can do it. Now, they've got this added piece to it, though. 4 of them aren't coming back. 8 of them, even though there aren't 2 spinners right now, will survive. But there is no clear understanding as to who is who. See what I'm saying? And that's a huge deal. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we head on into chapter 20, let's keep that in mind while we are going through maybe why certain people are feeling the way that they do, maybe the way that they react, maybe what that essence might do to the way in which they say or treat other people. And so that's called their motivation. It's those things that you don't quite know that are deep inside some people, and then all of a sudden one of your friends like freaks out. See what I'm saying? So you want to pay close attention to that in this. You understand it because it's where we've come from. Chapter 20. It was just the 9 of them then. Gregor felt like all the grown-ups had gone home and left the kids with a rat for a babysitter. Inside, he felt sick and hollow and very young. He looked around the group and realized there was no one he could turn to for protection. May as well get some rest. We may as well get some rest, said Ripred with a big yawn. Start fresh in a few hours. He brushed some cheese crumbs off his fur, curled up in a ball, and was snoring loudly within a minute. No one else knew what to say. Gregor spread his blanket on the floor and called Boots over. Go bye-bye, asked Boots, pointing in the direction Vicus had departed. They went bye-bye, Boots. We're going to sleep. Right here, Betty-bye time. He lay down on the blanket. She curled up with him without protest. Temp and Tick positioned themselves on either side of them. Were they standing guard? Did they really think there was anything they could do if Ripred decided to attack them? Still, it was kind of comforting to have them right next to him. Cockroaches. Comforting. Yeah, right. Luxa refused to lie down. Aurora came and wrapped her golden wings around her. Ares pressed his black, furry back against Aurora's, and Henry lay at his feet. They could take whatever precautions they wanted to, but Gregor felt sure Ripred could kill all 8 of them in a flash. He'll take out Henry and Luxa first, since they're the only 2 with weapons, and then just to pick off the rest of us one by one, thought Gregor. Maybe Ares or Aurora could escape, but the rest of them were sitting ducks. That was the truth. He might as well accept it. Oddly enough, once he did accept it, Gregor felt more relaxed. He didn't have any choice but to trust Ripred. If he could trust Ripred, then he could go to sleep. So he let himself drift off, trying to push the images of striped spider legs and jagged rat teeth from his brain. What a rotten day it had been. Yeah, I don't know if I've had a bad day like that before. Have you? He awoke with a start to a loud slapping sound. He instinctively crouched over Boots until he realized it was just Ripred smacking his tail against the ground. Come on, he growled. Time to get moving. Feed yourselves and let's go. Gregor crawled out from under his blanket and waited for Marith to get the food. Then he remembered. Marith was gone. How do you want to handle this food thing? He asked Henry. Luxa and I do not serve food. We are royalty, said Henry haughtily. Yeah, well, I'm the warrior and Boots is a princess, and you 2 are going to get pretty hungry if you're waiting for me to serve you, said Gregor. He was way over this royalty thing. Ripred laughed. Tell him, boy. Tell him your country fought a war so you wouldn't have to answer to kings and queens. Gregor looked at Ripred in surprise. How do you know that? Oh, I know a great many things about the Overland that our friends here do not. I have spent much time there among your books and papers, said Ripred. You can read? Said Gregor. Most rats read. Our frustration is we cannot hold a pen to write. Now move, Overlander. Eat. Don't eat, but let's go, ordered Ripred. Gregor went to the packs of food to check out what the supplies they had. It was mostly smoked meat, bread, and those sweet potato things. He guessed they might have enough food for 3 days, if they were careful. Of course, Ripred ate like a pig, and he would probably expect them to feed him. Okay, maybe 2 days. Luxa came over and sat awkwardly at his side. What? Gregor said. How do we make food? She asked. What do you mean? He asked. Henry and I, we have never actually prepared food, admitted Luxa. Gregor could see Henry scowling at Luxa, but she did not look at him. You mean you never even made yourself a sandwich? Asked Gregor. He couldn't cook much, but if his mom had to work late, he'd make dinner sometimes. Just stuff like scrambled eggs or macaroni and cheese, but he could get by. A sandwich? Is this a dish named in honor of Bartholomew of Sandwich? She asked, puzzled. Gregor said, I don't really know. It's 2 slices of bread with meat or cheese or peanut butter or something between them. I have not made a sandwich, said Luxa. It's not hard. Here, slice off some pieces of meat. Not too thick, he said, handing her a knife. Gregor sawed away at the bread, managing to get 18 slices of 1 loaf. Luxa did a pretty good job with the meat, but then she was used to handling blades. He showed her how to assemble the sandwiches, and she seemed somewhat pleased with her accomplishment. She took 4 for herself, her cousin, and the bats. Gregor took the other 5. It would be asking too much of her to serve Ripred and the roaches. He roused Boots, and she started right in on her sandwich. Temp and Tick gave polite nods of thanks for theirs. Then Gregor approached Ripred, who was leaning sulkily in the tunnel. He held out a sandwich. Here, he said. For me, said Ripred, with exaggerated surprise. Do you see how that comes afterwards? So now I have to reread it. For me? Said Ripred with exaggerated surprise. How very thoughtful of you. I'm sure the rest of your party would be happy to see me starve. If you starve, I never find my dad, said Gregor. Quite true, said Ripred, popping the entire sandwich in his mouth in one It's good we have this understanding. Mutual need is a strong bond, stronger than friendship, stronger than love. Do rats love? Said Gregor. Oh, yes, said Ripred with a smirk. We love ourselves very much. Figures, thought Gregor. He went and sat with Boots, who was polishing off her sandwich. Pause. Have you ever really thought about what real rats might think? Do they really just think about themselves? Do they really care for their brood? Do they look out for each other? Or is that just something that humans have placed on them? And that I've heard that in many, many stories. Another connection I have is Chiaroscuro in Tale of Despero by a wonderful, wonderful author. And I am wondering if this is kind of just a tale, a myth, a legend that humans have created. Because rats are rats, right? They're tricksters, they're players, kind of like saying a fox or a crow cares about something else. So maybe that's what I'm supposed to believe is that just anytime you have a rat around, you're supposed to assume that they're selfish, that they only think of themselves, that they are only looking out for themselves. Figures, thought Gregor. He went and sat with Boots, who was polishing off her sandwich. More, said Boots, pointing at Gregor's uneaten sandwich. He was ravenous, but he couldn't let her go hungry. He started to break his sandwich in half when Temp delicately pushed his sandwich in front of Boots. The princess may eat mine, said Temp. You need to eat too, Temp, objected Gregor. Not much, said Temp. Tick will share her food with me. Her food? So Tick must be a girl roach. He will share with me, said Tick. And Temp was a guy? Not that it made any difference to Gregor. It was just one more way he could avoid insulting the bugs. Since Boots had already munched halfway through Temp's sandwich, Gregor accepted. He tried to give them part of his food at the next meal. Breakfast was finished in 2 minutes, and they packed up. They were starting to mount Ares and Aurora when Ripred stopped them. Don't bother. You cannot fly where we're going, he said, and indicated the tunnel. It was barely 6 feet high and only a few feet wide. We're going in there? Isn't there another way to get to my dad? Asked Gregor. He didn't want to head into the dark, narrow space with Ripred, even if they had mutual needs. There is another way, but not a better way, unless you know one, said Ripred. Gregor could feel Ares and Aurora twitching in distress. What about the bats? I'm sure you'll work that out, drawled Ripred. Can you walk? Gregor asked Ares. Not long, not far, said Ares. Then we'll have to carry you, said Gregor. Ride you, flyers, ride you? Asked Temp. Flyers do not ride crawlers, said Aurora edgily. Why not? They rode on you, said Gregor. He was tired of everybody being so snooty to the roaches. They never complained, and they always pulled their weight, and they looked after Boots. All in all, the bugs were the easiest traveling companions in the Underland. The bats fluttered but didn't answer. Well, I'm not carrying you. I've already got Boots and a pack of pot roast, and Luxa and Henry can't carry you both, so if you're too good to ride on the crawlers, I guess you'd better ask Ripred for a lift. Do not use that tone with them, snapped Luxa. They do not sneer at the crawlers. It is the smallness of the tunnel. Flyers do not like a place they cannot spread their wings. Yeah, well, half of us haven't been having much fun flying hundreds of feet in the air either, said Gregor. He realized he was beginning to sound a little like a jerk. Ares and Aurora had not been mean or impatient when he and the roaches were scared of flying. Look, I know it'll be hard, but I'm sure the whole trip won't be in such small tunnels, right, Ripred? Oh, surely not the whole trip, said Ripred, bored to pieces by this argument. Can we start, please? The war will be over before we decide to travel. We will ride with the crawlers, said Ares shortly. Gregor helped Luxa and Henry set the bats on the roaches' backs. They had to lie face down and cling to the smooth shells with their claws. Gregor had to admit it did look a little bit uncomfortable to travel that way. He took Boots in the backpack and picked up his share of the food. Okay, lead the way, he said to Ripred. Finally, Ripred said, and slid into the black hole of the tunnel. Henry followed next with a torch and drawn sword. Gregor guessed he was trying to give the bats some feeling of protection. They went next, single file, on the roaches. Gregor waited for Luxa to enter the tunnel, but she shook her head. No, Overlander, I think it best that I cover our backs. Probably, said Gregor, realizing he still didn't have a sword. He went into the tunnel, giving Boots the flashlight to hold. Luxa brought up the rear. It was awful, cramped and airless, with some foul liquid that smelled like rotten eggs dripping from the ceiling. The bats were stiff with discomfort, but the crawlers seemed to be right at home. Ick, said Boots, as a drop of liquid landed on Gregor's hard hat. Icky. Yeah, ick, icky, agreed Gregor. He hoped the tunnel wasn't long. You could go crazy pretty fast in a place like this. He turned back to check on Luxa. She didn't look happy, but she was managing. What means this ick? She asked. Icky, yucky, gross, nasty, foul, said Gregor. Yes, that describes well the rat's land, said Luxa with a sniff. Hey, Luxa, he said, how come you were surprised when Ripred showed up? I mean, I don't really know the prophecy, but you do. Didn't you expect a rat? No. I thought one gnar beside meant a rat would be tracking us, perhaps even chasing us. I never imagined he would be a part of the quest, she said. Bika said we can trust him, said Gregor. Bika says many things, said Luxa. She sounded so angry that Gregor decided to let the conversation drop. They trudged on for a while in silence. From the periodic splashes on his face, Gregor knew that Boots must be getting wet. He tried to put his hard hat on her, but it kept slipping off. Finally, he dug out some catch cloths and tied them on Boots' head. You imagine wearing a diaper on your head so that the water starts going off? The last thing that they needed for her was to catch a cold. After several dismal hours, everyone was soaked and miserable. Ripred led them into a small cavern. The smelly water ran down along the sides of the place like rain. The bats were so stiff that Luxa and Henry had to lift them off the roaches and help them straighten out their wings. Ripred lifted his nose in the air and took a deep sniff. There, that has done much to conceal your odor, he said with satisfaction. You mean you just took us that way so we'd all smell like rotten eggs? Said Gregor. Quite necessary. As a pack, you are highly repugnant, said Ripred. Pause. Context clues. Repugnant. What do we know about the water? The water smelled like rotten eggs. They've been walking through it for hours. It's dripped all over them. They're completely soaked. But Ripred needed them to stink like rotten eggs because their regular scent was repugnant. What do you think it might mean? Repugnant. I bet the folks are kind of thinking because they smell like rotten eggs, they now smell repugnant. While on the other hand, we've got Ripred, who's trying to hide them and conceal them from the rats, who are going to sniff them out if they just smell like regular humans, right? So repugnant, to me, must mean terrible. Quite necessary. As a pack, you are highly repugnant, said Ripred. See what I'm saying? Gregor was too worn out to argue. He and Luxa opened up the packs and doled out food. No one felt like talking. Ripred swallowed his lunch in a gulp and stood in the entrance to the tunnel. Are we going yet? They were just finishing up when the bats went tense. Spinners, warned Aurora. Yes, yes. They've been on our trail almost since we started our journey. I cannot smell how many in this place, with all the water. What can they want, I wonder? Ripred. Yes, yes. They've been on our trail for almost since we've started our journey. I cannot smell how many in this place, with all the water. What can they want, I wonder? Ripred flicked his tail at Luxa and Henry and gave an order. 3-point arc. You two and I. Luxa and Henry exchanged a look and didn't move. 3-point arc, and this is no time to test my authority, pups, growled Ripred. Baring his terrible teeth, Henry and Luxa reluctantly took places on either side of Ripred. But back a few feet, the three formed a small arc between the rest of the party and the tunnel entrance. The bats took positions behind them. Gregor strained his ears, but all he could hear was the water falling. Was there an army of spiders after them? He felt as usual unarmed and defenseless. He didn't even have a root beer this time. Everyone became motionless. Gregor could tell that Temp and Tick tensed or sensed the invaders now, too. Boots solemnly sucked on a cookie, but didn't make a sound. Gregor could see the muscles rippling in anticipation along Ripred's broad, gray back as the spinners approached. He braced himself for a wave of bloodthirsty spiders, but it never came. A large orange spider with a small brown spider on its back staggered in and collapsed on the floor. The brown one was oozing a strange blue liquid. It made a great effort to sit up. Its front legs brushed its chest as it spoke. Vicus sends us. Gnars attacked webs. Many spinners lost. We too, we join the quest. And with that, the brown spider fell over dead. One dead. 3 left. 2 spinners have joined. 1 has died. Could that be one of the spinners who passes? Only 3 left. We didn't even know its name. Oh, man. The spinners have arrived. The spinners were attacked by rats. The rats went against the spinners' deal and their peace agreement. The rats have gone against one of their allies. You know, we've been studying World War II. We talk about the difference between the Allied powers, who are the Americans and the French. And who else is it? Who else is it? Do you guys know? Do you know? I'm going to have to go out and do my homework, but this idea that there's 2 sides. And the German, Italian, and Japanese side of World War II, they had another group, and they believed that they were not going to agree to work together, but they were going to respect each other's boundaries. The problem was, and the Russians were a part of the first part of that part. And when Germany, or the Nazi party, decided to go against their word with the Russians, they turned on the Russians and began attacking Moscow. Now, it ended up failing, but the recourse was that, of course, the Russians no longer wanted to side with the Nazis. The Russians then decided to side with the Allied powers and fight the Nazis and Italians and the Japanese. The spinners do the same thing. No, we are not going to participate. When the rats go against their views and their agreement, the spinners then choose to agree. Wow, that is a cool twist in the story. So now we have lost 1. We still have a spinner left. Things must be pretty bad back at the spinning space, right? Vicus sends them. Tomorrow you're going to have to come back, because now we have been added, and probably we're going to meet the first spider that I'm probably glad to meet in my whole life. Well, maybe. But come back tomorrow. I love you. Have a great day. Learn a whole bunch. Read on. Use motivation as one of the things that you can start exploring. Why do people say what they say? Why do people act the way that they do? Because of things that happened before. That's why. I love you. Have a great day. Read like crazy. Now get out of here. Peace.